For decades, the Yakuza was feared as the most powerful mafia in the world, but today, it faces a very unexpected threat: Japan's Generation Z. With young people increasingly uninterested in hierarchy, following orders, or keeping traditions, keeping alive the old Yakuza succession line is becoming almost impossible. This crisis could forever change the history of Japan's largest criminal organization and the way it operates. The Yakuza is being destroyed by a generation of young people who simply don't want to be part of it, and its membership is shrinking fast. But why is this happening? Stay until the end of this video, because I'm going to explain what happened and what's happening inside the new Yakuza. Before understanding why today's Japanese youth want nothing to do with the Yakuza, we need to go back in time, way back. We're talking about 10th century Japan, around the same period when Brazil was still a Portuguese colony. The Yakuza wasn't born as a powerful and secret mafia, like the ones we see in old movies. In fact, everything started in a rather disorganized way. In the era of feudal Japan, there were two main groups that eventually gave rise to what would become the Yakuza. The first group were the takiya, street vendors who sold questionable goods at fairs and festivals. They were like street vendors, but some of them sold counterfeit goods. They charged a kind of protection fee to other sellers and had an internal structure. There was a clear hierarchy. In fact, certain roles existed within the organization, almost like in a small company. The second group was the bakuto, who were involved in gambling. And here's an important point. Gambling has always been central to the Yakuza's identity. The bakuto organized illegal betting, mainly using dice and cards, and often collected debts through violence. These two worlds, the merchants and the gamblers, began to merge, and over time, they formed a network with their own codes of honor and strict rules of loyalty, discipline, and punishment. The name Yakuza actually comes from a losing hand in a traditional Japanese card game called untouchable. Yakuza literally means useless. It's a combination of cards that holds no value. But they took that negative term and turned it into their identity. By the 19th century, the Yakuza had grown significantly. Some groups started controlling territories, charging protection fees from merchants, and even influencing local political decisions. Over time, they became a true criminal organization, but with an image very different from other mafias around the world. While the Italian mafia, for example, operated in the shadows, the Yakuza operated openly. They had offices, business cards, official symbols, and some members even gave interviews. It was like a crime corporation, and, incredibly, Japanese society tolerated it for a long time. Some even claimed the Yakuza helped maintain order in dangerous neighborhoods. They resolved disputes, controlled Japan's underworld, and in rare cases, even participated in disaster relief efforts, such as after the Kobe earthquake in 1995. But behind that organized and sometimes benevolent facade, there were clearly many dark truths. During that time, the Yakuza grew so large that by the 1960s and 70s, it had over 180,000 members across Japan, divided into dozens of families or clans that competed for territory, influence, and a great deal of money. In other words, what began as small groups of street vendors and gamblers evolved into one of the most organized and well-known mafias in the world. But all of that was about to change. For a long time, the Yakuza seemed untouchable. They had money, power, allies in high places, and even a certain degree of social tolerance. But that started to shift, and fast. The first major turning point came in the 1990s. The Japanese government realized it could no longer look the other way. Japan's international image was being damaged, and domestically, public pressure was mounting. People were no longer willing to accept that reality. As a result, the government introduced increasingly strict laws against organized crime. The most important was the Anti-Boryokuden Law of 1992. This law formally classified Yakuza groups as criminal organizations and gave the police real authority to act. But it wasn't just about arresting members. The impact went much deeper. This new phase began to economically strangle the mafia. The law prohibited companies from doing any kind of business with Yakuza members. If you were affiliated with the Yakuza, you couldn't open a bank account, rent a property, get insurance, or even register a mobile phone in your name. That's right. No bank account, no apartment, no way to live a normal life. In addition, many major corporations began including clauses in their contracts stating that if someone was found to have ties to the Yakuza, the agreement would be immediately terminated. In other words, doing business with gangsters became a commercial risk. Another key factor was the rapid advancement of technology and digital surveillance. Times had changed, and now everything was connected. Police could track money transfers, monitor messages and calls, and even detect suspicious activity through apps. Hiding money or running illegal businesses became much harder, and it wasn't just the government taking action. Japanese society was changing too. Television networks began exposing scandals. Tabloids and weekly magazines published the faces of Yakuza bosses. Even local residents started reporting suspicious activity in their neighborhoods. The fear people once felt was now replaced by anger and rejection. No one was afraid of the mafia anymore. They simply didn't want it around. All this pressure forced many members to walk away, and some even tried to leave the organization for good. But that brings us to a serious problem. Once someone leaves the Yakuza, they're marked for life. No one wants to rent to them, no one wants to hire them, and no one is willing to give a second chance to someone with that kind of past. It's a stigma they carry forever. And so, little by little, the mafia began to shrink. Not because someone delivered a final blow, but because the Yakuza's own structure became unviable. Fewer members, less money, and dwindling power weakened the organization from within. And while all of that was happening, a new generation was growing up, quietly observing it all. A generation that doesn't fear the Yakuza, and more than that, has zero interest in it. Generation Z is dismantling the Yakuza without even trying. Born between the late 1990s and early 2000s, they came of age in a completely different Japan, one where the Yakuza was no longer feared, and in many cases, not even respected. Japanese Gen Z doesn't admire the mafia. They're not intimidated by it. And above all, they have no desire to be part of it. But why? To begin with, values have changed. Gen Z is more connected to the world than any generation before. They grew up watching reports, scandals, and documentaries that exposed the dark reality behind the Yakuza. And most importantly, being a gangster no longer means status. Today, it means being excluded from society. In the past, for some, joining the mafia was a way to gain power or escape poverty. Today, it looks like a terrible decision. The new generation has different goals. They want to make money through the internet, tech, startups, fashion, or video games. Many dream of becoming influencers, YouTubers, entrepreneurs, or simply living a peaceful life. It makes no sense to join an organization where you lose everything: your ID number, your legal rights, your freedom, even the ability to sign a rental contract. Young people understand this. They know that joining the Yakuza turns you into a ghost in the eyes of the law, a social outcast. And there's more. This generation grew up in a Japan marked by economic insecurity. They've seen how fragile stability can be, how brutal the job market is, and how fierce the competition has become. That creates a simple, powerful thought. Why risk my life and future in an organization that's already dying? On top of that, Generation Z has a much stronger sense of individuality. It's every person for themselves. They don't want to bow to rigid hierarchies, obey without question, or live under someone else's control, especially when a single mistake could cost them a finger or worse. That mindset is the complete opposite of what the Yakuza demands. And that's exactly why the next generation is turning its back. And there's another detail. Japanese culture is changing too. Today, there is more psychological support, more channels for self-expression, and more open dialogue about the future. That old model of the tough man, loyal until death, has lost ground to a generation that is more sensitive, more digital. And there's something very symbolic too. The Yakuza no longer inspires fear. Young people no longer see these groups as powerful or respectable. Many see them as outdated figures that don't deserve respect. middle-aged men trying to maintain a structure that no longer has a place in modern Japan. Generation Z didn't need to declare war on the Yakuza. They simply ignored it, turned their backs, and that, incredibly, is proving even more lethal. With the falling number of members and growing societal pressure, some Yakuza groups tried to adapt to modern times, but the world changed much faster than they could keep up. There were attempts to enter the digital world, crypto scams, online money laundering, even using social media to recruit new members. Some created front companies in areas like construction, adult entertainment, or private security, all to appear legitimate. But none of that worked very well. These days, any connection to the mafia is a huge risk. Companies investigate, banks block, and the police constantly monitor everyone's actions. The internet became an enemy. Everything is traceable, reportable, and exposed. Japan is one of the most heavily surveilled countries in the world. On top of that, the Yakuza faces a problem no modernization can fix: its reputation. Young people don't care about it, and society wants to keep its distance. The mafia's image has become synonymous with backwardness and social exclusion. Even those who try to leave and start over face major obstacles. A former Yakuza member can't find a job, can't rent a home, and sometimes doesn't even have access to basic services. The past is a heavy burden, and it weighs a lot on these people's lives. Today, the Yakuza is shrinking. The numbers speak for themselves. In the 1960s, they had over 180,000 members. By 2024, that number had dropped to fewer than 25,000, and it's still falling. Most current members are older now. It's increasingly rare for a young person to show interest in that world. Many clans are literally going bankrupt, with no money, no influence, and no successors. But does that mean it will disappear completely? The most likely answer is, not entirely. Organized crime always finds ways to adapt. And if the Yakuza, as we know it today, disappears, it's possible that smaller, more discreet, perhaps more digital forms will emerge. Groups that don't use the name Yakuza, but still do the same things. This may be the end of an era, but it's not the end of the problem. What we're witnessing today is simply the collapse of an outdated model. The traditional Yakuza, with black suits, tattoos, and codes of honor, is becoming a thing of the past. The future of these organizations, if they have one, will almost certainly be more invisible, quieter, and far less glamorous. In the end, what is destroying this group isn't the police. It's the culture itself. The Japanese people have changed. It's a generation that no longer wants to carry that burden, and a society that simply stopped tolerating what once seemed like part of the system. For decades, the Yakuza walked the streets of Japan like a shadow with a name and a face. It was feared, respected by some, tolerated by many. But in the end, it wasn't a war that destroyed it. It was silence. The silence of an entire people. A generation that didn't want to follow in their parents' footsteps, that no longer sees honor in that kind of life, that didn't want to wear the black suit or live on the margins of society. Generation Z didn't need to confront the mafia with protest or violence. They simply chose not to be a part of it. And that, it seems, is enough. Comment below what you think about all this. Thanks for watching until the end. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any videos, and see you next time.